Hey guys, bored now, back with Rachel Macdonald. This is going to be our latest top 10 video. So, this will be our top 10 movie villains. We've both come up with a list of our own, as always, and we sort of alternate. We go from 10, obviously, up to 1, and one of us does our number 10, and then the other one does their number 10, and obviously have a bit of a discussion about them too. Just to say before we start, this will not feature horror characters, and the reason for that is because we already did our top 10 horror villains, which was, I think, October, wasn't it? Because it was
Yes, it was for
for the
Halloween.
Halloween. So we've already done that. So that's why we decided to just do general movie villains. Villains are so crucial to movies and to the history of films. Obviously, a lot of great genre villains, a lot of great, I guess, more realistic villains as well. Many different, genres and types of movies, and just so important to making those things tick and to make the drama tick, and just to have that antagonist, which adds a little bit of something different. I mean, a lot of movies really wouldn't be the same without them, and obviously sometimes it's just cool to be bad. I mean, I'm sure we can both agree on that. So this list will be really interesting, I think, because there's so much to talk about, so broad, and obviously we're both doing our own list, so always interesting to keep track on if there's any crossovers. So let's see, as we make a start, obviously let us know your top 10 villains in the comments below. But Rachel, I'll let you go first. What's your...
Sure. Before I get into my top 10, I just wanted to, because we speculated a little bit when we did our horror villains, whether or not we'd have any crossover. Now, looking at my list, I actually don't know if we're going to have any crossover this time around. There may be one or two on my list that you might have. I also was with the horror villains. I remember thinking, oh, Keith will have this person, he'll have this person. I knew certain villains that you were going to have, but with this list, because it's so much broader, I honestly don't really know. There are two characters, and if you list them, I'll tell you whether or not they're the ones I thought. But there are two that I am 99% certain you're going to have, because I know you've talked about them and the movies before. But outside of that, I have no idea. What about you? Do you think there'll be much crossover, or do you have any idea who might be on my list?
There's one in mind, which I think we could have as a crossover. Yeah. One. I would say one for sure, because I mean, some of the others on my list, I don't know how strongly you would feel about them, but there is actually one in mind which I think we might have in common. And
terrific.
Just to add to what you just said there, it was really hard just because of it being limited to 10, because this is such a broad one, so many great villains. And it was very hard to narrow it down to 10. And
for me too. And there were a couple of times where I went to put a villain on and then I was like, oh no, wait, no, they're a horror villain. I had to make sure that I was staying, because so many great villains come from the horror genre. I mean, they come from everywhere else as well. But so I found this list quite hard to do as well. But all right, so I'll kick it off with my number 10. So my number 10 on top 10 villains, this is kind of a guilty pleasure villain, so to speak. So this villain comes from a movie that is not a great movie, not exactly what you'd call highbrow cinema, but it's a fun movie and he's a very fun villain. So number 10 for me is Cyrus the Virus Grissom from Con Air.
Okay, good choice.
So I love Con Air. For those who don't know or who are too young to remember the 90s, Con Air is a very cheesy 90s action flick about poor Nicolas Cage getting stuck on a plane full of criminals who have taken over the plane. And it is as cheesy and as stupid as it sounds, but it is also one of the most fun movies ever. It's just a fun script. It's a fun premise. And John Malkovich as Cyrus the Virus Grissom is obviously just having so much fun playing this role. You get the feeling that he knew this was a bad movie. He knew it was a cheesy script, but he just wanted to do it for the fun of it, He is really hamming it up in this movie. He's chewing the scenery. He's making up crappy little rhymes. He is just having the best time. So many lines that I love from Cyrus. I love the little rhyme. Oh, nothing makes me sadder than the agent lost his bladder in the airplane. So good. And within the context of the film, he's actually quite a good villain. Like I said, the movie's kind of stupid, so everything about the movie is also stupid, but the escape plan within the movie works for it. We get to see how they've hidden like needles in their hands to undo their locks, and how there's like a whole little like network of criminals within the plane that are all kind of working together. But Cyrus is obviously the leader. And I mean, John Malkovich is fun in whatever you're watching him in, but this one is particularly fun. The put the guy down, or the bunny gets it line when he's threatening to shoot the stuffed bunny. I mean, that's a great line as well. And it's just every time I watch the film, I just have so much fun watching him. You know, he is one of the things that makes that film like better than it would initially be. You know, when you have a bad script, when you have a cheesy movie, you really need actors that are going to come in and kind of just have a lot of fun with it. And I think because Malkovich is having so much fun with this role, that just makes it better. And he's quite threatening at times too. I mean, Malkovich is a bit of a scary looking dude. So when he wants to be scary, he can be scary. And towards the end of the film, when things start to get a bit more dire, you know, and the bad guys are getting like backed into a corner, we see that he can be quite brutal and quite ruthless. But he's just a lot of fun. So that was my number 10, Cyrus the Virus from Con Air. Love a good cheesy 90s villain. He's at my number 10.
Very good. No, that's a good pick. And Malkovich, good actor anyway, but I mean, as villains, he really excels. I think
he does,
has a very slippery, sinister sort of air, and he's capable, like you said, of definitely hamming it up to great effect. So yeah, that's definitely a good pick. So for my number 10, I'm actually jumping back to the 80s with this one. Now, you might say I'm jumping back to the future, although actually it's the past if it's the 80s. So, but you probably know where I'm going. I've gone with Biff Tannen, the main bully / villain of the Back to the Future trilogy. Love Biff Tannen, brilliantly played by the actor. We'll definitely say, okay, we've definitely come across that sort of guy, that sort of quite dweeby and sort of clueless, but also just a little bit. He's got that obviously mean streak, that nasty streak to him.
Yeah.
And the actor does a great job in the sense that he actually balances out the two different sides, because you definitely see the more weaselly, wimpy side of him. Like if you take the first film, for example, by the end of that film, having played, you know, this really in-your-face bully for so much of the film, it's then funny to see him basically be, you know, like the opposite of that at the end of the film. But the actor really plays that so well. He's like convinced in both sides, and he has a real presence. But obviously, over the course of the 3 films, you see different sides of him, which I think is really exciting, and different looks. Now, I'm going to say personally, I think his role and his persona in Back to the Future Part 2 is my favourite of the, like, for him, of those movies, because history sort of says now that he was inspired by Donald Trump. You know, like the writers actually had this idea because, you know, Trump was around in the 80s. And obviously based him on him. Very sort of power hungry man, bit of a bully. And once again, he has a real presence. And obviously the second Back to the Future film, I think it's fair to say, is the darkest of the 3. And there are some pretty dark scenes involving him and, you know, Marty and Marty's mother. Intimidating, very scary in that like portion of that movie. So yeah, Biff Tannen, I think over the course of those 3 movies, there's a lot of fun with him in the Wild West in the 3rd movie. And just one of those classic villains where you can laugh sort of at him type thing, you know, and when he gets his comeuppance, and there's some good comedy moments and pratfalls with him, but also there are more serious moments where you're like, oh man, this guy's scary, you know, this guy has this sort of nasty mean streak to him. So there's a good mix with him, and I think the actor plays him really well. I think he brings a lot of presence and charisma to him. So yeah, that's my number 10. Biff Tannen.
Very nice. Not one I would have expected. I haven't actually seen the Back to the Future film since I was a kid. It has been so long. So I think I might need to revisit them. But I think, I mean, Biff is a character that you definitely remember. And the 80s were really good for those types of villains, you know, the bully villains, the kind of stereotypical like jock bully villains. So I think that's definitely a good choice. And it's just reminded me that I used to love Back to the Future when I was a kid. So I think I'm definitely going to have to revisit it. But I like that one. Very unique, not one I was expecting. So very cool. All right, so coming in at my number 9 is a villain from a series of comic book movies, and that is Magneto, Eric Lenscher from the X-Men films. So here's my number 9.
Okay.
Now, I love Magneto. First of all, he's awesome whether he's played by Ian McKellen or Michael Fassbender. And that's a little bit rare when you get, you know, a villain that can be good as both the older and the younger versions of themselves. Obviously, I first fell in love with him when he was Ian McKellen in the X-Men films. I think Magneto has a great tragic backstory. I love a villain with a great tragic backstory, obviously being a prisoner of war, being in the Nazi concentration camps. You know, we see a lot of that in First Class, but we do see a little bit of that in the very first X-Men film. I love his relationship with Charles Xavier. I think sometimes a villain and a hero, they can very much be defined by their opposite force. You know, if you have a good villain, but you don't have a good hero, sometimes that can bring the villain down. But I feel that with Magneto, because he has that connection to Charles and he has that connection to Xavier, it really makes his character that much fuller and that much more intense. And so when there are stakes in the movie, when the X-Men are facing off against Magneto and his crew, it's not just a good versus evil. It's like two old friends facing each other. And I love the connection that they have. And I love that the prequel movies go more into that. So that's like just really a lot of fun for that. I think that both McKellen and Fassbender have a lot of charisma when it comes to playing Magneto. I think he's such a charismatic character. Like whenever he's on the screen, you just can't take your eyes off him. Again, whether he's McKellen or Fassbender, it doesn't matter which one's playing him. I'd probably give the edge to McKellen just because he was, you know, the original and he's Ian McKellen, so he's just awesome no matter what. But I just think just, you know, so much charisma and just so much fun. He's insanely diabolical at times. Some of his schemes are so intense. I mean, his scheme in X2, where he literally plans to use Cerebro to kill every single human on the planet, like that is insane. That's like insane levels of like diabolical evil. And I know that Magneto has like his own like what's what I'm looking for, like his own mission statement. You know, he's trying to do good for the mutants, but he's gotten so twisted, and his mission statement has become so twisted into evil and darkness and all of the, you know, all of the baggage that he's got and all of the trauma that he's got. So I think he's just such a layered villain in that sometimes you can understand his motivations. You might not agree with them, but you can understand this guy who has been vilified and hated and looked down upon, not just because he is a mutant, but also because he is a person of Jewish descent, you know, so he's got that added, you know, layer to him. So I just find him so much fun in like every single film. And that's the thing. Any X-Men film where he's playing the villain is just a good film and so much fun. I do like that we get to see a little bit more of his human character. You know, we get to see a little bit more of his good side in the prequel films. We get to see, you know, where he came from and that he was once on the side of good, so to speak. But I think the movies do a really good job exploring like why he's a villain and why he is that way. And again, when you've got good actors playing the role, when you've got actors who are so clearly having fun and enjoying the role and just having a great time, I think that really adds to, you know, to the character. So that's my number 9, Magneto / Eric Lenscher from the X-Men franchise.
Okay, good stuff. So my number 9, and I'll give you a bit of a clue because I'll repeat the famous line from the movies. The classic line is, "No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die." Have you heard that line before? I'm
I
assuming
have
you've
not.
heard the. Oh, you
I
haven't heard the line.
maybe referenced somewhere, but like it does sound vaguely familiar. But
Yeah.
yes.
No, it's so good. It's so good. Okay, so obviously I've gone for a Bond villain, and those of you who have seen the film will know which one. I've gone for Goldfinger. So we're
Okay.
talking about classic era Sean Connery Bond. So one of the very first Bond films, and I think maybe obviously the character of Goldfinger really just took the idea of the classic Bond villain to a whole new level. To plays him so well, he's got so much charisma. He obviously has great one-liners. I think just as a villain, he has. I mean, the guy wants to take over Fort Knox for God's sake. So he's got the perfect sort of maniacal type villainy type plan. As I said, the actor's really good in the role. He's very smooth and slick. I mean, he's got that sort of maniacal playboy sort of persona, which a lot of the classic Bond villains have, but he's sort of very sophisticated as well, which becomes a trend with like Bond villains, where almost to play mind games with Bond, he will like invite him into like his sort of, his setting and like have dinner with him and sort of wine and dine Bond, but secretly he's planning, to eliminate Bond type thing. But the actor's really good, and it probably led to them like having more character style actors play those villains, but very entertaining villain, very like charismatic, as I said, and obviously just laid down the marker really for those movies and what the villains could be. So it's a standout from that franchise, I think. So
Where like the cat is scratching the shit out of him and he doesn't doesn't move at all. Is that him? Is that the character? No, it's a different one. Okay.
Yeah, that would be Blofeld, who
that's
of
who
course
I thought you were
has
going to say.
reappeared in quite a
yeah.
few different movies.
Okay.
He's definitely one I considered having, and obviously some great actors have played him, including Donald Pleasance. He played Blofeld, but I mean,
Really?
yeah, he did. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
that's cool.
yeah. But yeah, Goldfinger for me.
The 8 is a slightly different kind of villain, not a big, evil, maniacal, supernatural villain, but someone a bit more down to earth, and that is the Queen Regina George from Mean Girls.
Oh,
Now,
okay.
anyone who's ever been a teenage girl knows that teenage girls are ruthless. Now, I went to an all-girls school in high school, so trust me, I have been through my own version of Mean Girls. And girls like Regina George are freaking scary. I love how she just epitomizes like the very worst of what teenage girls can be, kind of shows you how manipulative and how evil and how horrible they can be. She's fabulous. I mean, the girl is absolutely fabulous. She has self-confidence I would die to have. The scene where they cut the holes in her shirt, so she's got like the two little peepholes and she puts the shirt on, she just kind of goes, huh, and just walks off like she's the queen, and the next day everyone's copied her. It's fantastic. I also once watched a video from a YouTube that I follow, The Take, where they basically pointed out how Regina, like, her character has all the qualities of a dictator. Like, she literally works like a little mini dictator within the hierarchy of school. She has her underlings. She has, the set way that she does things. She's great at manipulation. She's great at, like, moving things around the board to get exactly what she wants. She's a queen. I mean, there's a reason she's become such an iconic character. And Rachel McAdams, this was the first thing I ever saw her in. And she just blew me away with her portrayal of Regina. She played her so well, so much sass, so much charisma. You hated this girl, and yet at the same time, you kind of wanted to be her because she was just so amazing. I mean, when you go to an all-girls school or when you hang out with mostly girls, it's kind of eat or get eaten. So you have to either become a mean girl or you're going to get stomped on. So you kind of wanted to be Regina George in high school. Even if she wasn't the nicest person, she was someone to look up to. It kind of makes me think of a line from Heathers when the main Heather, Veronica's pointing out how everyone hates her. And she's like, who cares? They all want me for a friend or a fuck. And I feel like that totally sums up Regina George.
Sure.
And the main character in the movie even says, you know, the more I hated Regina, the more I wanted her to like me. So I just think she's a great example of that queen bee stereotype. We've seen it in other movies, Jawbreaker, Heathers, even The Craft. But I think Mean Girls really exemplifies that and like emphasizes that toxicity that comes with teenage girls. And Regina George is just such a great villain. That twist towards the end of the movie with the burn book, still one of the best twists in cinematic history. Just brilliant. Just everything about her is fantastic. So that's my number 8, Regina George from Mean Girls.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, good pick. I like her a lot. I like Rachel McAdams a lot. Big fan of her. And my second favourite Rachel, of course, after yourself. So, but, yeah.
Thank you.
Really
I thought you were going to be mean. I thought you were going to be mean and say something like after Rachel Weisz or something.
There's going to be a choice. Yeah. Very good. No, good choice. Hey, and I'm sticking with the franchises for this, the big sort of franchises. So I don't know if I just say the name if you'll know who I'm talking about, but the character's name is Khan Noonan Singh. Do you know?
Star Trek?
Yeah, Star Trek.
Wrath of Khan.
The Wrath of Khan. Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan. So obviously this character is unique because he's the first villain who they actually brought back from the TV show, because he originally appeared in the TV show. So obviously he made enough of an impression to brought back. And Wrath of Khan is obviously one of the classic Star Trek movies. It has one of the most memorable endings of any of those movies, and the big sort of gut punch at the end, which people wouldn't have seen coming going into the movie. And Khan, particularly for that era of Star Trek, because obviously we're talking about a bit more of a campy style with those early original series and movies. So he does really typify that style of villain where he's a lot of fun, you know, he is quite campy, but also he's got menace to him, and he's very slippery and reptilian sort of thing. He's got a real presence to him. He's got that scary fashion sense when you see like images of him, which is just insane to look at. But he, a bit like, I guess, like a classic Bond villain, like I was talking before. He's the sort of character who can steal the movie out from like the protagonist, like because a lot of times he will be given the best lines of the movie, and or just his presence and his charisma. I mean, a lot of times he will, because in a way, you know, like obviously Kirk and the others are playing it more straight. It sort of allows him to have those sort of scene stealing type moments, but the actor is like really good in the role. Like the role fits him like a glove, really. And I think just as far as being iconic and being like both menacing and entertaining, like I said. Also, there's sort of layers to the villain when you watch the movie, like some of his motivation, and there is like a good sort of motivation to why he's doing what he's doing, and just some of the levels that he goes to really, you know, get back at Kirk and, you know, sort of tear away. There's sort of a good plot behind it and stuff as well, which sort of makes you more interested in him than if it was just, you know, a more generic type reasoning. So yeah, really good actor. I obviously love that he was brought back from the series, and Wrath of Khan in general is one of the best Star Trek movies. It's right up there, and he made such an impression. I mean, a lot of times you say, could someone else have played a certain role, and you can look at it, and I think that's one example where he really...
Including Khan from the new Star Trek, or is this just like old school Star Trek Khan?
Well, obviously I'd forgotten about that. No, I mean, this particular, and it's obviously something which we could mention as we go along here, because obviously certain villains have been portrayed by more than one actors. And
yeah.
In this case, I do have a preference for the older one, so I guess
fair enough. I think most people do. I don't think that Star Wars, not Star Wars, sorry, I apologize to Trekkies. Star Trek was as well received, but I did have to check. 7 is not an outright villain, they're more of an antagonist within the film, because the film is not so much a good and evil film. It's actually kind of weird. So my number 7 is the enigmatic and amazing Lisa Rowe from Girl Interrupted. Now, Girl Interrupted is obviously not a good versus evil film. It's a film about a young woman who goes to a psychiatric hospital and is diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And she meets an array of characters while in there. And one of those characters is Lisa Rowe, played by Angelina Jolie in such an amazing performance. Like, she won the Oscar for this role. Yeah. And when you watch Girl Interrupted, oh my God, you can really see why. This was my first introduction to Angelina as an actress. And I was just completely enthralled by her. So Lisa's character, so this movie set in the 60s. So obviously a lot of the diagnoses that were done back then, you know, obviously don't match up to today's psychiatry. But Lisa in the movie is described as being a sociopath. So she has a distinct lack of empathy, and, you know, she's a little bit unhinged, and she doesn't always take people's feelings into consideration. And she does become Susanna's antagonist, especially at the climax of the film. And I think that Angelina does such a great job of showing how charismatic these types of people can be, and how easily Susanna is taken under her spell, is so enthralled by her, because she's this seductive, wild, almost free kind of person, you know, in this institution where they're all being kept under such tight lock and key. But towards the end of the movie, you know, you start to see Lisa's sociopathic tendencies come out more and more in her interactions with Susanna, in her interactions with other characters. And there is one particular character played by Brittany Murphy who Lisa comes up against. And the outcome of that is really nasty. I don't want to give anything away just in case people haven't seen it. But by the climax of the film, that's where Lisa's kind of villainry really comes out. And you start to see that even though Susanna thought maybe at first she could be someone in her life, that she is not a good influence for Susanna, that she's not a person that Susanna should have in her life if she's trying to recover. So like I said, Lisa is not an outright villain, but she is definitely the antagonist of this movie. And if you were to say that this movie was to have a villain, it would probably be Lisa. But everything about her character, the performance, the way she's written, just the way that she works within the narrative as a foil to Susanna, just everything about that just made me fall in love with her character. And like I said, this was my introduction to Angelina as an actress, and she has been one of my favorites ever since. So even though she's not a true villain, that is my number 7, Lisa Rowe from Girl Interrupted.
Been a while since I've seen that movie, so I am due a rewatch of it. But yeah,
very intense movie, but very good.
It is number 7. So it comes from a movie. I don't know if you've heard of this movie or not. It's a French movie called Le Diabolique. Have you heard of that movie?
Maybe. It sounds vaguely familiar, but I don't really know what it's about. But the title sounds familiar.
A familiar sort of. So this is a classic French thriller from the mid-50s, and the character I've gone for is called Michael Destiny. I think that's how you say the surname. And so just to give you the setup of the movie, because if you haven't seen it or you're not that familiar, now there was a remake in the 90s, but the remake's not very good. There was like an American, there was an American remake with Sharon Stone and.
Oh dear! Well, that right.
Well, I quite like Sharon Stone, to be fair, but it's not the best. It's not the best. Okay, so Le Diabolique, the setup for it is, and it's set at a boarding school, and the character who I've picked for this choice, he's like the headmaster of the boarding school. Wife who also, I think she works at the school, like she's a teacher. Loveless marriage, he's quite sort of mean to her and abusive. And so her and her friend decide to knock him off, as you do, and they decide to kill him, and they think they've killed him, and they bury his body in like the pond, essentially, in the school playgrounds. And then one day they notice the body has moved. The body is no there. So that becomes the mystery of the film, sort of thing. Is he really still alive? If he is, where is he? Obviously, what happened? If he's not still alive and being, he's a really reprehensible sort of character. But I think just because he has this, like, where he is really a misogynistic sort of son of a bitch, and he just, because he has this sort of upper class, headmaster of the school type thing, it's almost like he wields this extra power over people. And it's just the combination of him, like, as I said, being a nasty misogynist, but also him having this real presence and the way the actor plays him. And he has these particular sort of gargoyle-like features that they're making scary, and it's one of those classic type thrillers where it is very slow burn and a lot of suspense, a lot of mystery, and certain use of like shadows and what have you. So it's sort of one of those where obviously the mystery around him, or the mystery around what exactly has happened in the middle of the film, and the film in general, I think it's pretty much a perfect movie, and there's some good twists and turns towards the end of the film, but the actor plays him very well, and he is a very sort of sinister, again, maybe a bit more like what you were talking about with some of your picks, obviously, unfortunately, a more realistic type character as well. There are obviously, sadly, people like this in the world, but it's a great movie, and he's just a son of a bitch, and really sinister with it. So obviously it works well for being like a tense type thriller. So Michael Dessler, if I've said that right, from Le Diabolique, the original from 1955. Yeah, maybe a movie we can do on the channel one day.
Definitely. Well, it definitely sounds interesting. Well, maybe what we could do is we could watch the original and then the remake and do a little compare and contrast. That could be fun. Very nice. Very unique pick. I like it. All right, so we're at number 6. We have reached the halfway mark. So in at my number 6 is another female villain, because I just love female villains. Another one who's a bit of a more chilled, more kind of real-life villain, and that is the wonderful Catherine Matoy from Cruel Intentions, played by the fantastic Sarah Michelle Gellar. So once again, this is another one where it's kind of like emphasizing of how mean girls can be when they're teenagers, and that kind of queen bee trope. Sarah, this is one of my favorite roles of Sarah's. I think she does such a good job as Catherine. I think she just seems, I think maybe she was having a lot of fun playing a villain, because at this point in time she was still doing Buffy, and so she was very known for being a heroine. So I think she's having a lot of fun playing a villain, but also playing a character who's a little bit more forward, a little bit more dangerous, a little bit more sexy. I think she's just so fun. She has so many great lines, so many great character details. The cocaine cross is one of my favorite character details in any movie. I remember the first time I saw the movie and she pulls out the cross and then all of a sudden she's unscrewing it and snorting cocaine. I was like, dude, that is fantastic. That is hilarious. And she's just, what's actually really funny about Catherine is, even though she's the villain, she's actually a fairly progressive character for that time. I mean, sure, she's a bitch, but she has a lot of really good points when she talks about the inequality and the differences between her stepbrother going out and getting laid and her going out and getting laid. It's like she says in the movie, it's okay for guys like Sebastian and Court to sleep with everyone, but when she does, she gets dumped for, more virginal girls. It's that whole Madonna whore complex. So I really like that Catherine points out those double standards that exist and still very much exist between men and women when it comes to sexuality and sexual performance and what you do in the bedroom. And I think Catherine very much just wants to be able to behave like Sebastian. You really see an inequality in that movie between the way Sebastian is treated and the way that Catherine is treated, when they're just as bad as each other. Like, neither of them is any better than the other one, but because Sebastian's a dude, poor Catherine gets a short end of the stick. But I just think she's great. She's an evil genius. Again, she's another one of those characters that's really manipulative. She really knows how to get under people's skin. You feel sorry for Cecile, but at the same time, it's a lot of fun sometimes watching Catherine mess with her, because she's just really dumb. And I just really love just you know, again, she's one of those fabulous queen bees. She has everything. She knows she's awesome. She knows she's fantastic. I also really like that Catherine, she doesn't have a lot of remorse, which I think is really weird for a female villain. Female villains, a lot of the time, they get brought down to earth. They get crushed, you know. It's not until the end of the film that we see Catherine being brought down. But for the most part of the film, she just does what she does. And she's completely unapologetic about it. And I think that's just fantastic. Cruel Intentions, again, not what you'd call highbrow cinema, but a really fun, cheesy movie from the late 90s. And I think Catherine's character just really makes that movie. And I don't think it would be the same without Sarah's performance. So that is my number 6,
agreed.
Catherine from Cruel Intentions.
Of layers to the character as well. And it's obviously, it's fantastic that she gets to really run with it, villain, rather than the Ryan Philippine character, who maybe at the start of the movie you think maybe he's going to be more of a villain. So it's actually cool that she gets to run with it. So that's very good. And I agree with what you said. I think Sarah Michelle Gellar must have had a lot of fun, because even in like the rare occasion in Buffy where she gets to play a villain, I think you can tell she's really enjoying it. Like obviously the classic 2-part with the body swap with Faith. I think when she's playing the bad Faith role, you can tell she's really enjoying that. So I think that's definitely film Dangerous Liaisons is very good as well.
Glenn Close. Glenn Close and John Malkovich.
John Malkovich
so good.
Again. Very good cast. So, I mean, similar to what we said last time, we could obviously do a future video comparing and contrasting those two. My number 6, which I know this is a character you're a big fan of as well, I've gone for Amy Dunn out of Gone Girl.
Nice. I approve.
I thought you would. So a career best performance by who I'll say right now should have won the Oscar. That
100%.
I mean, I love Julianne Moore, but Rosamund Pike should have won the Oscar that year, hands down. And this is the sort of role I want to see more from her. Really, I think she really excels again when she gets to play the villain and someone a bit more manipulative, underhanded, and I think in some ways a very modern villain, because although it's not the exact same example, I do think of her and the way, and I'll try to, you know, skip around spoilers, but I mean, the way the film goes with her and the story goes with the character, I almost think of her almost as like an example of catfishing type thing, but in a sort of way. So in that way, it feels like a very modern sort of villain. Her performance is so commanding. She's so slippery and just very manipulative, and obviously plays the two halves of the character so well, and has a lot of charisma in the role. She's having a lot of fun in the role, and just gets to be very nasty. And she is like, she does legitimately at times make your skin crawl, but because she's obviously playing so many different sides of the character, then there's a lot for her to balance, and she balances it all of it so well. There's some great dialogue for the character. There's some fun scenes to go along with obviously the sort of hard-hitting drama and just how nasty she can be. There's some good, definitely satirical moments in that movie that she gets to have fun with as well. But I do really think this is Rosamund Pike's type of role. I think she's a good actress anyway, but I think sometimes she's been sort of like stereotyped as, you know, the sort of just, you know, posh, you know,
kind of the English Rose
type. Yeah, type.
Yeah.
Whereas also recently, which again is closer to the Gone Girl role, she was in that film I Care a Lot, which I really enjoyed, and that again was closer to this sort of role, and sort of role I want to see her play more. She has a lot of fun, and she plays it where she gets to be very wicked and, as I said, manipulative and underhanded and blind, and you don't know much about the story. It is such a gut punch in the middle of the film. It is so satisfying, that twist and the way it plays out, and it's like it's obviously what a really good twist and good film can do, where it's like, okay, I didn't see that coming, and obviously it works so well because it makes sense and it's logical, and the way they sort of track back and explain it as well. So yeah, it's a tremendous performance by Pike. As I said, I think she should have won the Oscar without doubt, and it's a very relevant sort of modern villain. So that's partly why I've stuck it in here, and I think it's a villain that will stand the test of time. I think in years to come, I think people will look back, and I think just some of the stuff you're saying with your last choice, like the Sarah Michelle Gellar character in that movie, is refreshing to see females that to really play up and be really despicable and bad.
Yes.
Also have a cerebral, smart side to her, because obviously there's a lot of smartness, and there's this thing with the Amy Dunn character where certainly in her own mind she sees herself as being quite sort of feminist, and where she is very like bitter and cynical about the world, and she sort of sees it as, you know, I've been spat out and I've been mistreated by the world, by men. So I actually feel like what I'm doing now is justified. And it just adds that extra layer to the character. It's really satisfying that she does have that quite, you know, relatable sort of like motivation, and it's like, okay, that sort of makes sense. So even though you can't like get on board and say, yeah, I agree with what you did type thing. So a lot of layers to the character.
My villain is from, I guess, a franchise, although I don't think it's actually a franchise. It's more a cinematic universe. So I guess you've already guessed. My number 5 is from the MCU. She is an MCU villain, and that is Wanda Maximoff, aka Scarlet Witch. Now, I have loved Wanda since Age of Ultron, which is one of the few Marvel movies that I actually genuinely like, which I know is a very unpopular opinion, but I actually really like Age of Ultron, and I found Wanda to be such a creepy villain in that movie. Look, first of all, I love the fact that she's a witch. I mean, not technically, but she is kind of, I mean, she does use magic, so witch characters, always good. I love tiny little women with massive amounts of power, like one of my favorite tropes ever. So I love the fact that Wanda is so powerful. But in Age of Ultron, I really loved how creepy she was, getting inside all of the Avengers' heads, whatever the fuck she did to the Hulk that made him, like, completely freak out. That was like a whole, God knows what she did there. Now, obviously, she does have a heel face turn and she becomes a hero for a little while, but I did recently watch Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Not a great movie, but the stuff with Scarlet Witch was fantastic. Now, Multiverse of Madness is directed by Sam Raimi, and his direction comes out strongest when he's doing the Wanda scenes. You can see so many things from like Evil Dead references, like coming through a Multiverse of Madness. There's like so much cool stuff that is so very Raimi. And Wanda in Multiverse of Madness is such a great villain. So spoilers for anyone, but basically she's trying to reach through the multiverse to find a version of her kids that she had in WandaVision that she had to kind of, you know, get like destroy or change reality. And she does this really creepy thing where she does this thing called dream walking, where she manages to take over the body of like one of the own variants of herself. So like it's like Wanda 838, she takes over her body. The scene in which she takes over her body is like the pure Raimi nightmare fuel. It is so well done. It is just this intensely creepy scene where you see Wanda, you see the photos in the house move, and then all of a sudden Wanda's inside like the other version of herself. She curb stomps everyone in this movie. Like no one can really go up against her. And she also has a really tragic backstory. Again, I'm such a sucker for a villain with a tragic backstory, not because I think it excuses their actions, but because I love seeing the reasons for their actions. You know, I love a villain who just wants to come in and create mayhem. They're always fun, but I really love a villain who has a tragic backstory. And Wanda has lost her parents, her brother, her lover, and her children. Like, there's only so much loss someone can take before they snap. And I think that Elizabeth Olsen is having a lot of fun playing Wanda. a lot of fun playing that kind of evil, diabolical, desperate side. And so, yeah, after, like, she actually, when I first did this list, she actually wasn't on this. I'd compiled up to like number 8, and I'm like, who am I going to put as 9 and 10 and stuff like that? And then we watched Multiverse of Madness, and I was like, oh, Wanda's a great villain again. She can definitely go back on this list because she's back to being a villain. So I don't love the MCU as a whole. I kind of have this whole relationship with it where I'm like, okay, you just need to be over already because you've gone for way too long. But if it's still going to give us the occasional gem like evil Wanda Maximoff, then you know what, maybe it should keep going. But Wanda's a great villain. Her scenes are really fun. I think letting Raimi direct the Scarlet Witch was a really good choice because I think he does the character like so much justice and makes her really creepy and really intense. And so between that and Ultron, she can be a villain. So she's my number 5, Wanda Maximoff, aka Scarlet Witch.
Okay, very nice. 5, going back to the classics here, I've gone with the Joker from Batman, of course.
He was one of the ones I knew you'd have on your list. I was like, I'm 99% sure Keith is going to have the Joker on his list.
Quite highly, but Joker is definitely the Heath Ledger one from The Dark Knight. So, I mean, he's sort of the one I favoured, but obviously throughout the whole run, it's been a classic character, and when you have so many versions, there's always going to be some better than others. Character at its core and what it represents as a villain, I think it's just one of the greatest villains ever. And he's like this ultimate anti-hero. He gets to be really cool. He gets to be really funny and charismatic. But yeah, he is that classic staple of a comic book villain where he's there to upset the apple cart and there to shake up the worldview and offer alternative perspectives and just like steal scenes and be very like mischievous and just underhanded. And there's a whole like sort of, I think, really, again, the cerebral side to the character. He can be very playful, he can be entertaining. Obviously in certain versions he can be high camp and lot of sort of pratfalls and just literally just like a turned up version of an everyday clown who just happens to be like a villain. But then obviously as we move on with certain other versions, and particularly in The Dark Knight, he can be very sinister and plays the Joker. He brings a lot of humanity to him as a villain, and it's not just like he's pure evil. And one of the points is the fact that he is almost like making this very humanistic sort of argument for his existence, and it's obviously it's playing with this idea that maybe in some ways, you know, Batman is just as evil as this guy, or certainly some of his methods. Sort of slippery, very charismatic. He brings a lot of like rage at points, you know, very sort of intimidating, just the sound of the voice and the way he uses it in certain scenes. But it's this thing where it's getting into a very modern, edgy sort of area where suicide type bomber type character, or certainly playing with those sorts of ideas. But also just when we look at recent politics and some of the kind of extreme characters and the populist type figures and the way they sort of use information and certain things to like manipulate the truth, sort of blur the truth, and where they have a lot of charisma but they sort of use it in a way to like divide and, you know, people. And I think there's some of that in this portrayal of the Joker as well. But obviously, as I said, there's good and bad because there's been so many different versions and so many. Now, I still have the Batman animated series to watch. I've got it on DVD to watch because obviously a lot of people rave about the Mark Hamill version of that. So it's possible when I watch that, I might come away and say, okay, that's obviously it's different because it's a voice performance, so it's a bit different anyway. But you know, I may well come away and say that might be my favourite version of the Joker. Obviously, I would have to watch it, but I think the character in general, when he's on his game, when he's working, when someone gets him right, is it, you know, one of the most distinct villains ever in fiction, sort of thing. And
Yeah.
and like a classic Bond villain, a good Joker is so important to making like a Batman movie or a Batman TV episode work type thing. So that's my number 5.
Say that my number 4 is from a Quentin Tarantino movie. Would you know which villain I'm talking about, or hazard a guess?
I remember the name of the character, although I did actually see his name the other day. But I'm going to take a guess. Then it's the Christoph Waltz character from Inglourious
Bastard. Hans Landa from Inglourious Bastard, played amazingly by Christoph Waltz. So Tarantino has so many great villains to choose from. He's got like a plethora of guys you can choose from, but Inglourious Basterds is my favorite Tarantino film. I think it's such a great film, and one of the reasons it's so great is because of Hans Landa, who is such a great villain. He is pure evil. I mean, the guy's a Nazi, so that right there should tell you everything you need to know about him. But one of my favorite things about the way that Christoph Waltz plays the character is he plays him as like really affably evil, you know? Like, I don't think you ever, not until like the film really starts to get going, that you see that he can be so evil. Like the opening scene of Inglourious Basterds, which is a masterclass in suspense. Like that opening scene is one of my favorite opening scenes ever. And just the way he's so affable and so charming and so slippery with this farm owner, because he knows that he's hiding people under the floorboards. He knows exactly what's going on. And just the way he plays that scene, the tension just rising and rising, and he just sits there smiling. He's so affable. He's so charming. He's just come in for a glass of milk. So good. But of course, being a Nazi, he's a really evil character. Like, evil. I mean, they call him the Jew hunter, and he is just pure evil. But every scene he's in, he manages to just steal those scenes. The opening scene, the strudel scene, when Shoshana comes across him again and she has to sit there and eat strudel with him, not knowing if he recognizes her. And again, Christoph Waltz plays that scene like you're so tense during that scene because you're like, oh my God, does he know who she is? Is he going to realize who she is? That scene, and then of course the scene later on with the actress played by Diane Kruger, where he strangles her, and just everything about Hans Landa is insanely just evil and diabolical. But I also love how smart he is. You know, I love how at the end of the film he sorted everything out so that he can actually walk away and kind of be seen in like a good light, which is why I love what they do to him right at the end of the film, so they don't let him get away with that. But just, you just know that this guy has like his fingers in like 5 different pies. He's working like 1,000 different angles. He's making sure that this war ends up working for him. And so I think a character like that, and like I said, because he comes across as so affably evil, you can forget sometimes what he is, that he is a Nazi. He is a being of like pure evil, but he's just so affable. Oh, and Christoph Waltz speaking like 7 different languages. Like I remember that Tarantino almost didn't make this film because the character of Hans Landa had to speak 5 different languages fluently for the film to work, and Christoph Waltz actually could. So he came in and he's reeling off Italian and French and German and English, and it's just so good. So that's my number 4, Hans Landa from Inglourious Basterds. I think one of the best best villains to come out of modern cinema. Because
obviously, I know this is a point I was going to make, but I know it's sort of obviously a reappraisal of history, and
it is.
It's almost like, I think this is something Tarantino has done with his recent films, where he has sort of used them like almost like a B-movie premise to like sort of do these like reversal of history type things.
Yeah.
So that's
you must see Inglourious Basterds, though. Seriously, do put it on your list. It is so good.
Okay, I always hear good things, and I'm not surprised because I mean I'm very up and down on Tarantino, but
I get that. I understand.
I can definitely believe, because I think Faults is another one where he always plays good villains. I think when you see that he's playing a villain, then you know you're going to get a good villain.
You're in for a treat.
Yeah, because I mean that's another sort of crossover actually, because he played the most recent version of Blofeld in the Bond film.
Okay.
So
He did too. Yes.
he did.
Yes.
So
yeah.
before going back to the 80s and going back to another classic villain, I've gone with Hans Gruber from Die Hard from
Nice.
1988. The late great Alan Rickman in one of his defining roles. And I'll just say, just fun fact on this one is it's actually the second movie from that decade to feature a character called Hans Gruber.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And the other movie is Reanimator. There's a character called Hans Gruber in that.
Oh, wow.
And it's like the scientist at the start of the movie who comes up with the whole thing. So, yeah, just a little fun trivia fact there. And on the map and the role, which sort of, obviously he's one of those actors where he's very versatile. He's done a lot of different roles, but you can see why later on, for example, he would be cast as like the Sheriff of Nottingham, and why in other movies he's been cast as like villains, because he really has that menace, very European style figure, like villain, very sort of a bit more middle or upper class, where there's like an intelligence to him, a sophistication in the way he dresses, and that's one of the things I enjoy most about Die Hard is just the contrast between him and the John McClane, and how well they gel off each other. The fact that obviously at various points they're talking about like westerns, like using that as a metaphor, where obviously, literally for like the John McClane, that is almost like the sign of him being a more working class type villain, or more American working class, is the fact that he's into his westerns and like references them, and there's a lot of fun between them. There's polar opposites. I think it couldn't have worked out any better, and I just love that about the Rickman character, because one of the things about Die Hard too is, I think, just the fact that it's set in this building, and it's set in like a building that's got like a Japanese name, like the Nakatomi Plaza. Yeah. It sort of just represents this era in America where you were starting to get more sort of foreign businesses and ownerships. So it's almost like perfect. And like Hans Gruber is like this outsider type character who again is like foreign European, and he just comes in from the outside, and there's just so many fun things about his plot and the way it's carried out. Obviously there's a lot of charisma to him, and the way Rickman plays him, there's a lot of great one-liners, but definitely a menace as well. But I think just the way, as I said, the way he interacts with John McClane is very entertaining to watch, and that just the polar opposites to each other, which makes their interaction so good. But Rickman like carries the film so well, and it's really perfect, the fact that you get a good build up to them actually first meeting. And I absolutely love that the first time they actually meet, John McClane doesn't know it's him, because this is an example of how sophisticated and smart like Hans Gruber is. He actually pretends to be an American when they first meet, because he knows who this is, so he doesn't want to blow his cover. So he actually suckers him in, like puts on an American accent and pretends to be innocent. Iconic roles. And as I said, you can see why he did get cast as other villains. The Sheriff of Nottingham was actually an honourable mention, because he is just so much fun in the movie.
He really is.
Obviously, the line "Council Christmas" is one of my favourite lines maybe ever. And like, he just had a funny like story about that film, where it was like, he said it's almost like Kevin Costner and his crew were making one movie and I was making a different one. And I think he said like the actress who played Maid Marian, she said can I be in your movie sort of thing, which is great. I think it's an example where, obviously, in a weaker movie than Die Hard is, he really steals the movie and makes it really entertaining. And that's always a sign of a great actor and a great villain. But yeah, Hans Gruber, definitely a villain which has stood the test of time.
You look up any kind of like top movie villains and he is always in the top 10. And I mean, it's understandable. Die Hard is a classic. And, it's like I was saying before, your villains and your heroes are sometimes only as good as each other. And like you said, seeing like McClane and Gruber play off each other is like definitely elevates that movie. Side note, isn't it cool how both our number 4 villains are called Hans? I mean, Hans Thunder and Hans Gruber.
Yeah, I never would. The odds on that must have been really slim, yeah.
I know. That was kind of cool. That's a nice little coincidence because we actually haven't had any crossover yet. So, which I didn't actually think we would really have much. But yeah, that's kind of cool that both our number 4 are called Hans. So number 3 is young Anakin Skywalker from the Star Wars franchise. Now, let me clarify. This is Anakin Skywalker, not Darth Vader, because Darth Vader, kind of lame. I mean, when I finally saw the original movies, I was like, he's not even the big bad guy. He's just like the dragon. Like, what the hell? No one told me this. But Anakin Skywalker, now I know that we've had a whole conversation about the prequel movies off screen. That's a whole nother debate for another time. But what I absolutely love about the prequel movies is that they tell Anakin's story in such a way that it just made me fall in love with the character. And I know that's unpopular. I know people hate Anakin Skywalker. I know everyone wants Hayden Christensen to die for that performance. But you know what? It worked for me. No, he doesn't. We're going to have a conversation about that. I have so much sympathy for Anakin. Now, usually when it comes to villains, I just love them as villains, and I'm like, you don't need any sympathy. You're a villain. But Anakin's kind of an exception. He's like my poor little murderous sweet summer child. I love him so much. I know he's out there killing Jedi children and whatnot, but he's got so much pain and there was so much in his backstory. I mean, the kid was literally a slave for the first 10 years of his life. Then he basically gets sold into another form of slavery. I mean, the Jedi are messed up, man. Okay, they got all sorts of problems in the Jedi temple that they need to get sorted out. But they basically took this tiny little traumatized child, ripped him away from his mother, and then said, you're not allowed to have any emotions. No emotions. Emotions are bad. Then he goes through all this trauma again where he sees his home planet attacked, his mother is killed, and again the Jedi are there saying, no emotions, no emotions, emotions are bad. So it's no wonder that this kid ended up with all this stuff just built up, and then along comes Palpatine whispering in his ear. I think it's totally understandable why he fell to the dark side. So Anakin Skywalker, I love him. And I know this is unpopular, but I actually think Hayden was fine. I don't think there was anything wrong with Hayden's performance. I think it was a bad script and he had to do the best with what he had. But Revenge of the Sith, he has a lot of good moments in Revenge of the Sith. I think he has a lot of good moments where he really shows Anakin's struggle. And I think his final fight with Obi-Wan is actually really intense and really emotional. And we all like to mock the big no at the end, which I totally get, because that was just a moment that I don't even know what went through everyone's minds when they wrote that. But just everything that Anakin went through, everything that he suffered, and everything that was taught to him, and the way the Jedi tried to indoctrinate him, and the way the Jedi have issues, and I think that they are at least partially to blame for what happened. Anything wrong, and he needs to be protected. No, he's definitely a villain, definitely a bad guy, but I love watching his descent into villainry, and I don't have the issues with Hayden Christensen. I don't think Vader in the original movies had much characterization because obviously they were doing things on the fly. They didn't know where they were going. Right. So we only really got the characterization in the third movie, with the whole connection with Luke and finally giving up the dark side. But I think the prequel movies, for all of their flaws, because there are a lot of flaws in those movies, I think they do Anakin's story justice. My precious little murderous baby, Anakin Skywalker.
Very good. Quite the title. Okay. My number 3, and this is actually my second choice from a foreign movie. So my number 3 is a character called Raymond Lemon, aka the gloomy one. And he is from, have you ever seen the original The Vanishing from the 80s? Okay,
No.
so a Dutch film from the late 80s, and it was remade again by America.
Yeah,
In
because
the
the title does sound
90s,
familiar.
yeah, Kiefer Sutherland was in it, Sandra Bullock,
Oh,
but
okay.
once again, crappy American remake, but sort of unique actually, because the original director did the American version as well, and yeah, it was
okay.
it was still crap, but they obviously they did that thing of changing the ending, making it a more style ending.
Yeah.
That. But the original, The Vanishing, a Dutch film, as I said, from the late 80s, is a really good film, a really unsettling, atmospheric, claustrophobic film, very disturbing film. And he's a very disturbed villain, which is why I've gone for him at number 3. Kidnaps this guy's daughter, like she disappears one day from a gas station when they're on like holiday. From the dad's perspective, like it's him looking for his daughter, him trying to get clues, trying to track this guy down. So for a lot of the movie, I think you see the character, like the villain, in like small little snippets, but you don't actually see that much of him. But he has a very imposing like voice over the telephone, and just the way he plays mind games with the father character, and just how. Yes, very sinister. There's obviously an air of mystery for him because you don't see a lot of him. And yeah, really understated villain, really sort of manipulative and nasty villain. And the end of that movie is one of the great gut punches of any movie.
Oh, okay.
My God, this is disturbing stuff, and just the way the whole thing plays out. It's a really good movie, and he's a very convincing villain. Again, I think in this case you're talking about a more everyday, more realistic type villain, draining for anyone, because the fact that you're sort of in the dark, like the father character, you're in the dark about if the daughter's still alive, if she's still out there, where is she exactly, if she is still alive. And I think it's just the psychology of watching him go through all this torture.
Yeah.
I think that's what makes it a really powerful, scary movie. So it's a very like realistic sort of horror type movie. That's my number 3. And
very nice. So another unexpected one, but yeah, another one that I'll have to check out. And again, another one that maybe we can visit in the future and have a look at the original and the remake. Yeah, that'd be very cool. Yeah. All right, so we've reached top 2. So for my number 2, I'm going to give you a little musical cue that I think will give away exactly who this is. But if you ever hear Wicked Witch of the West from The Wizard of Oz.
Excellent. Yeah.
Now, The Wicked Witch of the West is an iconic movie villain. Margaret Hamilton, so much fun. She is obviously just having the time of her life playing this character. Now, The Wicked Witch of the West scared the living daylights out of me when I was a child. She still kind of scares me when I watch Wizard of Oz and I hear that music. She was so scary. Between her appearance, I loved the green. I loved that whole look that they gave her, because that's not from the original movie. Sorry, the original book. In the book, she just looks like an older, scary kind of lady. No, the green is specifically from the MGM movie. So her look is iconic. The effects that they use to make her appear and disappear, the winged monkeys that, again, used to just scare the crap out of me. Those fuckers were like, no.
Very scary, yeah.
And when I was younger, there were 2 scenes in particular that, I swear to God, almost gave me heart attacks when I was a kid, both to do with when she has Dorothy locked in the castle. At one point, Dorothy is crying she has like this big crystal ball, and she sees her Auntie M in the crystal ball, and she's crying, and she's like, Auntie M, I'm here, I'm here. And then all of a sudden, Auntie M's face turns into the witch's face, and she starts laughing and like mocking Dorothy, and it's just horrifying. And the other scene is in that scene, so basically the witch, she wants the ruby slippers, which, you know what? I would too if I were her. She's just wandering along, minding her own business. Then some chick drops a house on her sister and steals her shoes. I mean, when you think about it, who's really the villain here? But anyway, so she wants the shoes, but they've been like melded to Dorothy's feet or something by Glinda. And so she locks Dorothy in a room and she holds up an hourglass and she says, when the sand falls, you will die. Now, as an adult, I now obviously understand that she's just going to leave her in the room and then come back and fetch her. But when I was a kid, I genuinely thought that the minute that hourglass, like, emptied, that Dorothy was just going to drop dead on the spot. Like, that was literally how I thought that scene was going to go. So I remember being like 5 years old and almost having a heart attack because I was like, I don't want to see Dorothy die. I don't want to see her just drop dead. So I remember that scene was so scary for me. And then all the scenes where she's riding around on her broomstick and she's cackling and she's throwing fire at people, like, she is just such a great villain. I know Margaret Hamilton, they had a lot of issues on the set of The Wizard of Oz, and I know at one point the fire or the smoke effect actually set fire to her makeup, poor girl, so she actually got like second-degree burn. So that's like intense. So the girl, like, the woman gave a lot for that performance. So I think it deserves to be remembered as like the iconic performance that it is. And I think the Wicked Witch, she's just one of those characters that's like, she just haunts children's nightmares. I mean, I don't think there's a single child that saw The Wizard of Oz that was not terrified of her because she was just that effective. And I love her. And like I said, I always love witches. Witches are always good in my book. And she was such a stereotypical witch with the broomstick and the long black cloak and that pointed hat. She was great. So the fact that I still find her terrifying is why she's earned the number 2 spot. So that's my number 2, the Wicked Witch of the West.
The rat catcher or something from like Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, like or the child catcher or whatever. Yeah, rat catcher.
I remember him. Yes.
Yeah, and you just think for a movie like that, which is a family movie, he was really scary. And it's similar thing with what you're talking about. And I think just because obviously when you are younger, you are so much more impressionable then. And you are obviously more naive to the world and stuff. So these things, these memories do stick with you. My number 2, it's another woman, but a very different female type character. I've gone for Nurse Ratched from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which I think might be one of my favourite movies, full stop, like favourite movies ever, but definitely her villain is such a great part of that movie and the drama around it. Such a great, like, antagonist, as we said, like Louise Fletcher, another Oscar-winning performance, which was well deserved by her. And I think just one of those things where, like, because she has authority and she has the power over these, you know, fragile, like, mental health patients, then it's because she abuses it and uses it against them. Then maybe a bit like the character I was talking about earlier, like the headmaster character, where, you know, these vulnerable people have been entrusted to her, and the fact that she abuses that power and sort of uses it against them is maybe a big part of why she's a great villain. You know, about it's that thing of she's a very human type villain, and someone who it's sort of scary, the idea of them being in control of this place and then having that much power. Also, like, through Fletcher's performance and just the way the character's written, there's a lot of layers to her as well. I think there are more human moments, and there are moments where, because I think, like the Jack Nicholson character at times, he's not always sympathetic. I think there are moments where you see the other side of the coin, where you can say maybe, maybe you can see her point a little bit at times as well. Maybe he is being a bit too hard to handle and stuff like that. But so, I mean, there are moments of humanity, which is a credit to the performance and to the way the character was written. But she's very sort of icy, has a real sort of presence. She's very grounded. You definitely believe that there are characters like this, thrives on the drama and makes it really intense and like engaging to watch, but it does make her character very infuriating in a way that really is satisfying and makes for good sort of drama. But it's always a lot of times, sometimes the more human villains or the villains that are when they're in a position of authority and they're just abusing that power and almost using it for evil. I think sometimes they can be the best sort of villains. Like they are the easiest villains to sort of rebel against.
I hate to admit that I have not seen One Flew Over. It's one of those movies that I always meant to get around to watching, and I just never did. Eventually, I'll probably find it cheap and buy it because, I mean, everything I hear about it is that it's a fantastic movie. You know, I obviously know all about Nurse Ratched. I know that Jack Nicholson's performance is supposed to be one of his like better performances. Good, question: did you like the TV series? The Netflix show.
I've seen 2 episodes and I'm quite enjoying it so far. But I did only see 2 episodes. I like obviously Sarah Paulson.
Sarah Paulson's so good, isn't she?
They obviously went for something a bit different with that one. They did make it more of a satire type thing. But from what I've seen of it, I'm quite enjoying it. Honorable mention is Cruella de Vil from 101 Dalmatians. I mean, especially with the Glenn Close performance, I really
Glenn Close is so good, isn't she?
Yeah, so much fun, but so sinister as well. I mean, at the end of the day, she was in favour of like killing dogs and using them as fur, you know. So
you don't
I mean,
do that, man.
That is pure evil.
It is.
And Glenn Close is so good in that role, and the recent film as well. You know, I think
I haven't seen it.
It's worth checking out. Yeah, she is good. Yeah,
I love the cartoon too. I always used to get freaked out at the end of the cartoon when she's driving along the road and her eyes are like really wide and bloodshot. And it's like, dude, woman has lost the plot.
So Cruella de Vil I really like. Also, The Wicked Witch of the West was an honourable mention. Also, I know you haven't seen this film, but the sort of main villain from RoboCop, Clarence Berdeka, I think you say his name. And now that actor, because I know this is a weird sort of side path, but I know it's a show you've seen and quite like. The actor who plays him plays the dad in That 70s Show. That's
it's his name is completely gone out of my head. Red. You're talking about the actor who plays Red. Kurtwood Smith.
That's him.
I love Kurtwood Smith.
He's a great actor, and he's actually known for playing villains, even though some people know him for that role. But I mean, there's a few different villains in RoboCop. There's different people who you might say is the main villain, but I think in many ways, he's just so slimy and disgusting and nasty. And, he's a great villain. He definitely stands out for me. Also, Agent Smith from The Matrix, particularly the first Matrix film. I love Hugo Weaving's performance as that. And he's a great villain in those movies. The character of Anton Chigurh, I think you say his name, from No Country for Old Men. Yeah,
he is fucking terrifying, man.
Scary as hell.
Dude, Javier Bardem in that movie is like something else, man.
Yeah, just the way he pronounces things, the way he talks, has a very dry, deadpan sort of delivery. Just his whole appearance. I mean, he does look like a Hammer-style monster, like
he does,
Frankenstein or Dracula. And the whole thing with the flip of the coin game is so scary and so terrifying, and yeah, it's an amazing performance, and the look of the villain, everything. Darth Vader I like more than you, so I mean I did consider him, but yeah, those are like honorable mentions.
So I only had a few. So one of mine was Ursula from The Little Mermaid, because she was always one of my favorite Disney villains. Absolutely love her. The Little Mermaid is my favorite Disney movie, and just Ursula in all of her octopus glory is just so much fun. It was the first movie I ever saw as a cinema. I was at the cinema. I was 4 years old, and I remember that scene where she gets like absolutely massive and just sitting in the cinema like, whoa, okay. So that was like another one from like my childhood that kind of, you know, carried over. Another one I almost put on the list, but I decided not to because he is a villain, but he's also the protagonist of his movie, and that was Tom Ripley from A Talented Mr. Ripley. Now, I know in the books he's more of an outright villain, but in the movie they try to make him a little bit more sympathetic, even though he does do a lot of really dastardly things. I think that Matt Damon in that role was fantastic. Like, so good. He gave me chills. He was just, the way he could switch from like really charismatic to like really scary was like, dude. But like I said, I didn't put him on the list because I don't know if the movie wanted us to see him as an outright villain or more as like an anti-hero almost, because I mean, he does do some really fucked up shit in that movie, but he's also very human in that movie, and a lot of the stuff that he does, you can see like what has driven him to do it. So he almost made it onto my list. Let's to guess our number ones, because I actually think I know who yours is, and I'm thinking you probably know who mine is, given that I haven't mentioned it yet. So hazard a guess as to who my number one movie villain is.
For a crossover was Amy Dunn. I thought you might have Amy Dunn, but is it? Oh, it is. Okay, number one. Oh, very.
Yeah. Oh, it was the Joker. The Joker was my other honorable mention from Heath Ledger's The Joker. Was going to be my other honorable mention, which I love, but there were just a few that I loved a bit more than him. But no, Amy Dunn from Gone Girl is my number one. She is everything I want in a female villain. So as you said, Rosamund Pike, so good in this. The only things I'd seen her in this before were Pride and Prejudice and this other one set in the 50s, which was like a, I think it was Made in Debenham or something. And she'd only ever played the English Rose type characters. Seeing her in Gone Girl and seeing the brilliance with which she played Amy Dunn, that razor sharp edge that she has, the manipulativeness, the charisma when she needs it. And like you said, her character itself, the character of Amy herself is such a chameleon that you see Rosamund playing so many different aspects of Amy. You know, there's this version of Amy, then this version of Amy, then this other version of Amy, and she slips in between them so well. She is just everything that female villains aren't allowed to be. You know, she's smart. She's ruthless. She plans. She sees her plan through. She doesn't let emotions get in the way. She's not highly sexualized, which, God forbid, there's just women, when it comes to female villains, people love to sexualize female villains. So the fact that Amy Dunn is not sexualized is such a great thing. Like, obviously, she uses sex as a weapon and she's an attractive lady, but the film doesn't film her. You know, she's not shot through the male gaze. She's not shot with the intention of her being sexy or alluring. She's just an awesome villain. And okay, I'm going to go into spoilers here, guys. So if you haven't watched Gone Girl, maybe just cut out. But the fact that she wins is awesome. Like the fact that she goes through all of this and she still manages in the end to get her husband, her baby, her life, her fame. And she just, the way she just walks down the stairs at the end of the movie knowing that she's got everything. It's just so good. And there's this little part that I think almost every female viewer has this, where you know that Nick doesn't deserve this much of a punishment, but Nick is such a dickhead that you kind of cheer Amy on, even though you know she's being insane and she's taking things maybe a little too far. You still watch the movie going, yeah, good for her. You go, girl. Like, she just has that ability to just draw you in. I think she's so magnetic. You can't take your eyes off her when she's on the screen. And just everything about her, like you said, that wham moment in the middle of the film where we get that reveal, and then that beautiful monologue that follows afterwards where we get all of the details of her plan, all the intricate details, everything that she set up. Now, I've read the book too. And the movie is such a good adaptation of the book.
Yeah.
I mean, it was written by Gillian Flynn, who wrote the book. But I think that when you read the book, like, Rosamund Pike really was the perfect casting. Like, when they describe Amy in the book and the way she's written in the book, like, they could not have gotten someone better to play her. So, yes, that is my number one. Amy Dunn from Gone Girl. She is just amazing, and I love her so much. I love her to slightly uncomfortable degrees. Like, I told Stephen, I'm like, just be careful, babe, don't do anything to me, because I've watched Gone Girl. I got all sorts of ideas brewing. But it's just, she's fantastic. So she's my number one and our only crossover.
Yeah,
Now,
which I predicted, but
yes.
and I think also something you said there is another good sign of a really good villain, where there is a side of you that no matter how disgusting they are, there is just a little side of you that wants that life, or you are drawn into the world, and you sort of follow the characters, and because you are with her on that journey.
Your number one is John Doe from Seven.
Okay.
That was my prediction, but it sounds like I'm wrong.
Interesting. Well, I will say he's another one who was an honourable mention. So
I got it wrong.
I considered, yeah. I mean, obviously, as awkward as it is with Spacey, but he did play villains really, really well, and there's obviously two standout villains with him, because there's also Kaiser's. Well, that's sort of a plot twist, although the movie's like 25 years old now.
Yeah, I was going to say, you don't get a plot twist from The Usual Suspects. I think you've been living under a rock. It's kind of like The Sixth Sense.
But he's obviously behind two.
Okay, so I was wrong. So now I have absolutely no idea. Because my prediction is either going to be the Joker or John Doe, because I know that you love John Doe. I've seen you talk about him before. So
yeah, he's a good
surprise me.
Okay, so my number one, and I could just sing in dreams in a really sinister sort of way, but I'll just say my number one is Frank Booth from Blue Velvet.
Blue Velvet. How did I not think of Frank Booth? Oh, what's wrong with me?
Obviously.
That was such an obvious one.
Me being such a big Lynch fan, and Blue Velvet, one of my favourite Lynch movies, and it's a significant role for Hopper, because it's his first role back since, having alcohol, drug type problems. So it was a massive role for him, and it was such a scene-stealing role. It really, really a method type performance, where he got so much into the characters. It was scary, and he couldn't even go for dinner with the fellow sort of cast members. And in real sense, it's just thinking about the character and thinking about Hopper playing the character is very scary, because there is some parallels to the real Dennis Hopper, and there is some blurring of the lines, and that the context of that makes the character even more scary than he already is. But beyond that,
enough.
Beyond that, where in the hell Dennis Hopper pulled this performance out of it is hard to really fathom, because another actor who, generally speaking, is at his best when he's playing villains. We both love Speed. We both love the character in that. But obviously, a lot of times his villains are more on that scale, where it's a bit more hammy, a bit more, fun and stuff. But yeah, bar the odd small moments, there's nothing fun about Frank Booth. He is, in a very real sense, he is a disgusting human being. Obviously, just to give you the general sense, he kidnaps this singer played by Isabel Rossellini. So well played by Isabel Rossellini.
Yes, she gives another great performance in that movie.
Her, but yeah, Frank kidnaps her. He sort of holds her to ransom, because he obviously has her child. History of the ear comes from that sort of thing where he's taken the ear from her husband and just forces her to be his girlfriend, to
the
take
abuse he subjects Isabella Rossellini's character to is
underhanded, depraved sexual plots. Hopper is so mesmerizing in the role, so scary, so animalistic is definitely a good word, where he's just really unrelenting. And sometimes with villains, the most scary thing is when you can't predict what they're going to do. Because when you watch some of these like lighter type movies and these more pantomime type villain, a lot of times part of the fun is then you can see what they're going to do next, and you can enjoy that side. But this character is so off the wall, so unpredictable, and I think at times it is the most scary thing about him, where if you could at least know what he was going to do, then you might have some sort of comfort zone. But because you don't, and you're on edge, like the characters are on edge, and that's one of the things then the film does so well in the way it gets this tone, is it obviously does have these weird, quirky sort of moments, and partly because it's sort of pastiche in, like Lynch always does, the underbelly, the dark underbelly of this sort of more phony type world in a way, this more pastiche sort of thing. But it does, because of that, there are actually quirky sort of funny moments in Blue Velvet. But because you have these really weird sort of random scenes with the Hopper character, like obviously the classic scene where they go joyriding, and it starts off with them stopping round at one of his friend's place, and they obviously start, they've got like the microphone and the light, and they're singing these songs and just scenes like that, where obviously there's always this edge in the background of them, because then the Kyle MacLachlan Jeffrey character has been coerced into going with them on this joyride, and because we know then his cover's sort of been exposed a bit, and the Hopper character is so protective of, like, this is my woman, don't come near her type thing, and we've already seen examples of what he can do early in the movie. Just throughout those scenes, as they play out very slowly, you just fear for Jeffrey's life and his well-being, because at any moment, if Jeffrey says the wrong thing, then Frank could snap, or
even just looks at him the wrong way.
It's just like that thing of not knowing what he's going to do and what his intentions are. Like, does he just want to have fun with Jeffrey? Does he intend to kill him? And just that thing that Lynch does in the movie, obviously, when he starts doing that, he's singing along to the Roy Orbison song. And in theory, it's this very romantic type song. But it's the backdrop of him obviously beating Jeffrey up. And one of the funny moments in the movie is when he goes on that rant about, imported beer, when he asks his favourite beer, and obviously Heineken. He's like, Heineken, fuck that shit. And he starts listing, like American beers. So it's a funny scene, but again, it shows another side to the character where he's probably a bit racist. He's got an issue with the idea of imported beer and stuff like that.
Dear.
I think that's another side to the character that probably makes him really loathsome and maybe a bit ahead of his time as well. But obviously amazing performance by Hopper, and great character, just one of the most terrifying and unforgivable, reprehensible.
There's definitely not someone you want to ever encounter in real life. And you never want to come across someone like Frank Booth. Like, just run in the opposite direction if you ever do. It's just bad. And I know you've said you don't really want to revisit the movie, and I can't blame anyone for that. Obviously, I love the movie so much, and
But even me, it's a favourite of mine, but it's not a favourite. It's not like, hey,
let's sit around watch Blue
relaxing
Velvet.
Friday night video or DVD. Let's slam on Blue Velvet. No, it's not one of those. It's one of those you need a bit of distance between.
Definitely. It's so intense, like such an intense film, and just a lot of depictions of abuse and violence and just, yeah, I can't believe, I think when I was thinking of his list, I thought, oh, Keith will probably have Blue Velvet, but then I just forgot about it. But then, yeah, as soon as you said Frank, it's like, oh, yes, that's right, we have Blue Velvet and Dennis Hopper and all his scariness. Oh, man. Yeah, it really gives it that all. No, very awesome number one choice. But no, I am surprised that John Doe didn't end up on your list, because I swear I've seen you describe him as like the best villains. He is a great villain. But that's great. Oh, that's awesome. That was actually really cool. We didn't have a lot of crossover in this one, which I kind of like, it shows the varying tastes and what we like in our different villains. But I do like when our one crossover was Amy Dunn, because she's a worthy crossover to have.
I thought you might have her, but yeah. Very nice. Yes. Yeah.
Very cool. Okay. Oh, that was awesome. I really liked that. Really, I liked a lot of your picks. I thought it was fun that we didn't have that much crossover. And I think it's just really nice. Because I think through these lists, you can see, what type of villains, what type of characters we seem to gravitate towards. And it's just a nice look at, the different things that you get out of villains and the different things that you take away from movies and what you enjoy in villains and stuff like that. So that was a lot of fun.
And it was good then, through the list, there was examples of, we both said, okay, I haven't actually seen that, or maybe it's one I've not seen for a while that needs revisiting. So it definitely gave us ideas of stuff we can watch and maybe review in the future. So that's very good as well. So. Yeah, so that's our individual list, top 10 movie villains. We do, of course, want your lists in the comments below. Now, I guess, if you want to include horror villains, we'll let you. It's just we had that rule because we'd already done the horror list. But if you want to include some horror, then go ahead. But anyway, top 10 villains. If you want to put your lists in the comments, like and subscribe. Let us know what you thought of our list, some of the picks. And also you can suggest future top 10 lists, because we're always looking for ideas. So I should just promote what our next list is going to be, because it's going to be a special list, and that's because we're approaching the 1-year anniversary of me and Rachel doing reviews together. And obviously, since a big part of our content has been horror related, we thought it would be fitting if we did a top 25 horror movies list. So we're doing an extra long list since it's a special anniversary video. So that will be our next list video. It will be 25 horror movies, which means 50 horror movies, basically. A bunch of others up on the channel, including the original top 10 horror villains, as we said. So if you enjoyed this video, that's obviously one to maybe go back and catch up on. Like and subscribe, as I said. Share us out on social media. You can also support the channel for as little as $1 a month. That's on Patreon, which is patreon.com/boardnow for some extra content. Or if you just want to make a one-off donation to PayPal, you can do. The links at the top of the channel. I might put it in the description actually, but there is a PayPal account if you just want to make a one-off donation. That's always appreciated. So thanks for listening, guys. And Rachel, if you just want to promote your channel before we go.
Guys, you can follow me at Rachel Macdonald, video essays covering a wide variety of topics, but mostly TV shows and movies from the early 2000s. I've just recently done a couple of Scream movies. I've got a couple of videos coming up on First Kill, the new lesbian vampire show, and Carmilla, which was the web series that kind of started it all. So look out for that. Both my Tumblr and my Twitter are linked through there. I'm actually spending more time on Twitter, so come and follow me there. And yeah, just follow me everywhere, guys.
And guys, we'll be back soon with, as I said, that big 25 horror movies list, and also more movie and TV reviews coming up soon. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.
No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Pay me $1 million. Sorry. $100 billion.
Maniacal laugh. Maniacal laugh. Maniacal laugh. Maniacal laugh. Maniacal.